told you that in a not too distant future, farms near you may stop growing the wheat needed to make those laddus? What if I told you that farms may also stop growing rice? There may be no animal farms, no milk, no meat or eggs. You may also not be able to eat the fresh catch of the day from the oceans. So what will you eat? In a not too distant future, you and I will be eating lab-grown food, food grown in laboratories and factories. And I know you have a lot of questions, I do too. For starters, why do we need lab foods? What's the problem with the regular food we are eating? Will lab food even taste the same? Will it be good for our health? How will food be made in labs? And exactly how long into the future are we talking about? Will we then stop farming altogether? We'll try to answer all of these questions. Let me start by showing you some numbers. Do you see this? This is how fast our world's population is growing. Currently, there are 7.8 billion people living on this planet. Our population has tripled in 70 years. Not too long ago, in 1990, there were 5.3 billion of us. In 2015, the number jumped to 7.3 billion. By 2030, we will be 8.5 billion. By 2050, 9.7 billion. 9.7 billion. That's how many mouths we'll have to feed in less than 30 years from now. Demand for food will be up 60%. And we'll have to produce 50% more food to ensure everyone gets their meals. Currently, the world produces enough food to feed everyone on this planet, but the fact is fancy only on paper. The reality is, over 821 million people go hungry to bed every day. That's 2.5 times the population of the United States going hungry every day. Every 10 seconds, a child dies from hunger. The food never makes it to her plate. Nearly 3.1 million children die of hunger-related causes every year. More than 99 million children under the age of 5 are undernourished and underweight. Some estimates say that we are already producing enough food to feed 10 billion people. But what's the use of it if we can't even feed the current population? What will we do when we have 10 billion mouths to feed? Well, here's where lab foods come in. They can be made quickly and literally anywhere on earth. Here's a question. Why turn to lab food at all? Why not try to ensure that farm food reaches every plate? You see, farm food is not sustainable. One, it is subject to climate risk. Every weather event affects our crops. When there is a drought, our crops fail. When it rains too much, our crops rot. There was a heat wave in California earlier this year, and now prices of canned tomatoes in the US are soaring. That's because California produces 90% of canned tomatoes in the US. There was drought and freezing weather in Brazil, and now coffee prices are rising the world over. So you get what I'm trying to say. Every time there's an extreme weather condition in Maharashtra, our onions cost more. We've all dealt with this. Point number 2, farming has an environmental cost. It pollutes the water, the air, it takes away forest land, animal habitat, and the much needed buffer between us and the animal kingdom. Number 3, animal farming is cruel. Let's face it, no matter how much we love nuggets, wings and bacon, we've got to agree that killing animals for our food comes with a serving of moral hiccups. Did you know 70 billion animals are killed each year just so that we can continue enjoying our roasts and steaks? Our demand for meat will soon outpace the supply of cows, pigs and chicken. What about crops? Do we want to continue exposing them to extreme weather and locust attacks? The question actually is not whether we want to, it is whether we can afford to. Can we afford to continue relying on conventional farming? Scientists say traditional agriculture will collapse in the next 2 to 3 decades because of climate change. So what do? Turn to lab food perhaps. You can also call it farm-free food. How is it made? By cell culturing. Consider chicken. When farmed conventionally, chicken is caged, injected with hormones, fed unnatural food. The poor hen never sees a blade of grass or the light of the day and goes on to be culled. Now here's what happens when chicken is grown in a lab. Step 1, a muscle stem cell is extracted from a chicken. Step 2, it is then split into pieces. Step 3, the sample is immersed in a bioreactor full of broth. The broth has sugar, salts, proteins and vitamins. Step 4, the broth is kept in an oxygen-rich environment under regulated temperature. And voila, you have chicken ready in just 2 weeks. What's more, the process requires less water and less land. The jury, however, is still out on carbon emission. Experts say factories producing lab-grown meat must run on renewable energy if they want to leave a smaller carbon footprint compared to animal farming. As we speak, meat is not the only product being made in labs. There's coffee, lab-grown dairy, flour. A lot of this, of course, is under trial and will need regulatory approval before they can reach the market. Lab-grown meat has already reached the market. Singapore has become the first country to approve it. Do consumers approve of it? Does lab-grown food taste the same as farm food? Well, if made well, we are told it does. The world's first artificial beef burger was created in 2013. They said the meat was dry and dense, so scientists worked on it and tried to mimic the taste, smell and texture of traditional meat. Today, a lab-grown burger patty is very similar to a normal patty. Next question, is it safe? The meat made in a lab won't have the bacteria that contaminate conventional meat. But all of this does not mean that lab food is going to be 100% safe. Some experts are concerned about the hormones used to grow lab food. We still don't know how overexposure to these hormones will affect our health. Next question, will lab-grown food have enough nutrients? Well, this is where it takes the cake. First of all, it is highly customizable, and by that I mean the nutrient profile of food grown in a lab can be controlled. Let's again consider the example of meat. Too much consumption of red meat is not good for us. We all know this. It has been linked to heart diseases and diabetes. Why? Because red meat is high on saturated fat. But while growing red meat in a lab, scientists can adjust fat levels. They can also replace saturated fat with, say, omega-3, which is normally found in fish or flax seeds. So lab food will make it possible for you to eat steak with the goodness of seafood. Food grown on conventional farms, on the other hand, will soon run out of nutrients. A Harvard research shows that staple crops, when exposed to levels of carbon dioxide predicted for 2050, will lose up to 10% of their zinc, 5% of their iron, and 8% of their protein. So lab food will undoubtedly be a healthier alternative. Let's now talk money. How much will lab-grown food cost us? The answer to that depends on when you buy it. The 2013 hamburger was priced at $325,000. Today, a hamburger made of lab-grown meat costs nearly $11. That's down 30,000 times. Lab-grown food has already become cheaper. The trend is likely to continue going forward. Experts say in future, natural chicken will cost more than lab-grown chicken. Final question. How far into the future are we talking about? Lab-grown meat is already in the market, also lab-grown meat alternatives. Estimates say that by 2040, 30% of meat consumed will be lab-based. This is what the picture will look like less than 20 years from now. Lab food could help feed 10 billion people. A single muscle stem will be able to make enough meat for 80,000 hamburgers. So from where I'm sitting, lab-grown food looks like the future. But a lot needs to be done to make sure that this future is sustainable. First, we need to address the question of overexposure to hormones. We also need to guarantee that food labs will not use non-renewable energy. Here's something else. Millions need to consider alternative livelihood. Think about this. What will happen to those employed in the farming, animal husbandry or dairy industry? Governments will have to deliberate for farm-free food to become the future. The world will need to make difficult economic changes, difficult livelihood changes and lifestyle changes. Well, will all of this be worth it? The story, we say, is still cooking.